Check, check, check. Greetings, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. My name is Brian Laidlaw. I should start with a quick reminder to everybody to turn off cell phones if you haven't already. And I also want to thank the sponsors of Verse Like Water, this incredible series, Central Lakes College, the CLC Foundation, and as always, Minnesota Public Radio. Brenda Hillman is the author of 10 collections of poetry, including Practical Water, which won the LA Times Book Award for Poetry, Seasonal Works with Letters on Fire, which won the Northern California Book Award, and her most recent Extra Hidden Life Among the Days. Among the many honors Hillman has received are the 2012 Academy of American Poets Fellowship, 2005 William Carlos Williams Prize for Poetry, and fellowships from the NEA and Guggenheim Foundation. She's also my favorite poet. And when I saw she was reading in this series, I asked, or more like begged, Jeff Johnson if I could introduce her. I'm a student of eco-poetry, which is a type of writing that doesn't just describe the environment, but actually participates in the ecosystem, operating with a knowledge that, as Ralph Waldo Emerson puts it, words and deeds are quite indifferent, that is to say, indistinguishable modes of the divine energy. Words are also actions, and actions are a kind of words. On my pessimistic days, it can feel like words are inert, sitting in their books at a far remove from a world in crisis, an imploding government, a collapsing environment, where action is urgently necessary. On those days, I turn to Brenda's work as a reminder of what happens when words catapult themselves off the page and into the ecosystem, and then start doing meaningful, hard, healing, critical, ecstatic work within it. And I wanted to sing a song that I wrote based on the book Cascadia by Brenda Hillman. This song is called A Map of California, and it goes like this. You only see a mountain for its skin. Well, that rock keeps going back and down and in. And the edge is just the place where you begin to bring to light whatever it might hold. And I wasn't trying to overturn the stones. I'm traveling through valleys no one owns. But love is one of those unknown unknowns. So now I'm checking for a fleck of gold. 'Cause the heart is like a map of California, 100 miles behind every fold. And there's always something special in its veins, even on this highway of at least a dozen lanes. 'Cause some essential trace of it remains, a bit of magic where the wagons rolled. So we never really know quite what's in store. Some extraordinary stranger at the door who'll say the word that shakes you to the core. Someone to come and bring you from the cold. And the heart is like a map of California, 100 miles behind every fold. And as another vista rises with each curve, it feels like I struck gold and you have struck a nerve. Every inch of this is more than I deserve, but still you're truly a wonder to behold. It's a poem with a world in every line, fractal oaks and hatch marks of the pine. Honey, this is what I mean by the divine, something pure and sweet that cannot be controlled. And the heart is like a map of California, 100 miles Thank you so much. Please join me in welcoming the best poet, Brenda Hillman.
Thank you, Brian. That was so moving. Yay. It's an honor to be here. And is this audible if I stand here like this? Yeah. Wow, what a great community, and what a beautiful day, and what a lovely building and wonderful song. I'm honored. Thanks to Hanky for the work for the public television too, and to all the teachers here, and to all of you students and community who have come out. How many people, I feel called upon to ask, are at their first poetry reading? Many people. Okay, I was told that this is the case, so I'm going to tell you just a couple of things about a poetry reading that you probably have heard, but maybe if you haven't heard, I'll just reiterate. The thing about a poetry reading is that you're probably not going to get everything at the first hearing. You know, poems just kind of go by. And since I'm not a fan of people reading their poems once and twice and three times to make sure that it's drilled in, you'll hear it. And what I'm hoping today is that for several things, I'm hoping that you hear a few lines that you like and want to read on the page. I'm definitely hoping it will turn you on to poetry. I'm definitely hoping it'll enter your life and infuse you with a longing to write your own poems forever. How many people have ever written a poem? Has anybody never written a poem? Okay, so those of you who just raised your hands, I hope that you'll write one by the end of the year. And you can even send it to me if you want. I think a lot of us start writing poems. I started when I was 9, and so and I've never stopped. But a lot of people write it when they're little, and then they stop for some reason. They just think, oh, that was a thing you did for school. But I think we need poetry in our lives very badly, not just at weddings and funerals or on inauguration days. We need it daily because it's sort of magical. So I'm going to start. I have a new book, and this is the very first reading I've given from my new book. It looks like this. It's got an orange on the front, and it's a rotting orange. It's got a lot of mold, but it looks like a planet. And I think one of my philosophies of poetry is that everything can be made into poetry, and a rotting orange has a great beauty. So I'm going to read for a little, like 40 minutes or so, and then I'll answer a few questions. And I hope that they'll be easy questions. Okay. So I choose my poems for each reading sort of individually based on the community, and I thought we've all been under tremendous stress, and we've all been wondering when life is going to start up again. That sort of feeling of incipient life. When am I going to get out of this stressful feeling and depression and all that we've just been through? So I chose some poems kind of in that realm, and also about autumn and beauty and love and activism. A slightly stressful walk uphill. And I'll say 2 or 3 words that again, along the lines, you won't get every word, but bryophytes are mosses. That's the moss, the category of moss. Chlorpyrifos is a really dangerous chemical that is sprayed on crops and makes people sick when they work with it, but it's a pesticide. And John Clare is a poet who was mentally unstable, who crossed the fields in England, wandering about making his poems. A slightly less stressful walk uphill. How do you hope to survive? And not just that, was it even the question. By midday, the fog was burning off. Screech and call beside the anyway. The parent osprey had gone out looking for the right fish. Did it fear stone? And bryophytes rested on the soil as the soul might rest on the what-ifs. You were trying not to waste poetry's time on stupid questions. All the yous going along out there, tired, getting through meetings, never enough sleep even if you nap at the office, checking the phone, tiny electrons of joy, messages from large specific you, small specific you, large general you, pressure-filled colleagues whose healing had not occurred but still might. Tech certainly hadn't helped. Chlorpyrifos, cities eking out funds, people sleeping in tents with black and white dogs and children, racist prisons. You're getting numb to the list. Growth in the service sector, women working 3 jobs, production of power, and that tone in the prophet voices when you call customer service, growing slightly more officious, suspecting the next downturn. You wake with nano-minutes of stress built up overnight, offshore breezes, fear of fires, mosses bunched near the small oaks. Did they fear stone? Women had experimented for centuries with too much cortisol. So, what to do now, since doing was the problem? It was just mainly important to get through the day, with the minutes moving roundly rather than lengthwise. Surely one note could be singled out. For example, the screech of the baby osprey, the nest waiting, heavy with proudlings. Perhaps a calm could be entered, like cooked fog, or a monarch butterfly coming through looking like John Clare flying across the enclosures. On the other side of the highway, steel tubes of dairy trucks were grinding along, the milk sloshing inside, and besides that, the hope of circular spirits bringing a map of formless order where a legendary love was taking place beyond control. I'm going to ask you to do an experiment. So if you have pockets, like even in your jeans or whatever, imagine in the right-hand pocket you have science and fact, things that are true, the solid daily facts of your life and the science that you read about. And then in the left-hand pocket, you have myth and magic and religion and stories that people have told that are just like mythical, and they weigh the same. So that's how I want you to try to keep your balance, because poetry can kind of tend more toward the mythical and the magical, or it can tend more toward the fact and the realist, but I sort of like it to keep them balanced because I think they're equally important, and I think that dead spirits are informing us a lot. So I want to acknowledge that we're on Ojibwe land, and that the ancestors who were here are here, and that we honor the people that were here. This is for my grandson, and I think it explains itself. It's a 3-line poem with a 2-line title. The child finishing 4th grade online when his mother asked, "How was that?" said odd. Like many kids, did a lot of Zoom class the last few years. So there's a really great book that just came out. So in California, we're experiencing a really bad drought. And I have just participated in a collection of essays about water. And it's called Water's Edge. I brought the title page. I didn't want to bring the whole book because it's heavy in my little bag. But it's by Lenore Manderson and Forrest Gander, who is read in this series. They collected the work. And I wanted to read a couple paragraphs from my essay, just because the name of this series is Verse Like Water, so I wanted to honor water as an element. I asked loved ones about their first memories of water. I asked my San Francisco-born husband this question, and he said, fog. I asked my parents for theirs. My father said, being baptized in the Leaf River near McLean, Mississippi. My mother said, diving off a rock into the Guaíba River in Porto Alegre. My father came from southeastern Mississippi, Scots-Irish subsistence farmers, hard-headed and smart and not always charitable. My mother's people were immigrants to Brazil in the 19th century, rebellious Protestants determined to save Catholics from idolatry and to teach reading to the poor so they could read the Bible without intervention. They stayed there as teachers for multiple generations, living at the edge of poverty. All bodies are immigrants. All nations and bodies are melting pots and melting plots. A confluence of destiny flows inside every human body. Every body is a watering place. The physical properties and metaphoric implications of the water molecule enchant me. I developed a crush on the water molecule, its poetic tumbling and freedom and wildness, third most popular molecule in the universe, in charge of the atmosphere, precipitation, respiration, and the life cycle. The pronged two H's and O's, the slightly negative and the slightly positive attracted to each other. The atmospheric, both acid and base properties, colorless but a bit blue, the best solvent. It has been called oxidane, hydrogen oxide. I began to think it has a special kind of thought. It isn't that non-human objects don't have experiences. It is just that we aren't supposed to overwhelm them with ours. In my childhood animism, I knew the water inside a cactus might be experiencing something different from a Brenda. The fate of the water molecule was to tumble between watersheds with athletic, poetic force. For the hydraulic regions, I use slashes to indicate dams the molecules have to leap over. I developed an anarchic approach to document and research, to begin from fragments of consciousness and feeling rather than pure idea. Poetry concentrated amounts of empathy and imagination. I want to encourage you to write poems from fragments. Like just write something in your notebook and then sew them together like a quilt maker. That's a lot of a contemporary style. Okay, so this is a poem I wrote for my students, and since there are a lot of students here, I wanted to read it for you. We had a lot of power outages in the last few years because the power would go out when there were wildfires. Our power company had to turn off the power. So my college, which is a little college in the East Bay, said, go ahead and meet your students anyway. And I said, well, what are we supposed to do without lights? Use your phones, they said. Everyone can use their phones. So I had my students take out their phones, and we all read poems off of our phones. And after the power came back, the great dead circled the serrated hills. They tried to remind you to breathe. An old rat crawled under fire-forgotten rocks. It was called and pulled to a movable nothing, far from the human need to heed and heal. Maybe you can't find it now, but the season hauls the wind outside, and because you're a student, you can put some questions in your phone, especially when you feel you shouldn't cry. Stipple the worry, the grief-torn, those patterns of should and won't. New minutes set in past danger, spikelet or callous on the roadside. You stop in awe and are home. Your human burden varies. The once boundless freedom you sought, even in private, still pulses on your skin. The little thistles between the human and non-human animals, the linked auras in trees, and a colorful radiance of bodies are hunched to begin. One of the things that I was having my students do is sort of imagining light over each other's heads, because I'm an old hippie, as you can probably tell already. But the idea that there's light over everybody's head is sort of the origin of halos, because people really do have a kind of light, colorful light. I was practicing on my shuttle driver yesterday when I was going to the airport. I was saying, like, oh, his light is changing from light to sort of bluish. So if you really stare over each other's heads, and that's what I mean, I think science and magic kind of link up. One of the things I do as an activist is I have a trance practice, so I do a lot of hypnotherapy, and I sit in my room and I set my phone for like an hour, and I do a meditation in which I try to heal things with, just a word or whatever. And so one of the things that I do is sort of go into different words, and they can sort of heal each other in different motions. So one of the words that I was practicing on was the word hate. And so this is a poem about that. It's from a book, a couple books ago. And I had been doing a little trance with the word hate. Autumn ritual with hate turned sideways. I pull the hate on a rope ladder to the resting zone. H, H, H. Pull the A on down. A. Put that sick A to bed. Get well, A. Pinched fire. Bring the T down now. T. Roman cross before the Christian thing. Bump, bump. Put that T to bed. Put that Garamond T to bed before we kill someone with it, such as whack, whack, weapons contractors in Virginia, whack. Get well, T, won't kill with you, now. Being able to breathe for the E, breathe into the prongs, slide on its back, E. Put that E to bed. Get well, E. Weird shapes around campfires, below the mind. Tiny fires with hurt earth spirits as in Aeschylus. Resting letters now so they can live. So you can heal a word like that, just imagining it in your mind that the word is getting better. So we had some deaths in our family. This is another autumn poem. And I know that, and I was talking to a friend recently about skin cancer and how the skin rises to meet the wound, if any of you have ever had skin cancer surgery, but I had a very large one in my forehead. And the skin had to heal by rising. So this refers to that and also to the deaths in our family. My little grandson had just been born. Between the souls and the meteors, the ancestors turn in the sycamore, leaves like hunched over squirrels. A freeze might take the lemon tree, that thing of dozing over a book, the writer just God powder now. Miles up, sparks dragged through meteors. Miles down, creatures eat rock mixed with fire. Someone prays for you even if you don't like it. Our suicides sleep in the mind of a word. We want our mother not to have suffered. Moonbeams snake where the tan oak shivers. We want our father not to have suffered, or the 3 cats sprinkled with western dawn. The little baby sleeps on his side, his dream face turned to the woods. A fox sleeps with its mouth of color, and the O in your head, the damaged vowel where the skin rises to meet the wound. What does that spell? I don't know, since it got to go on living. But it seems like basically it's kind of a combination. Everything means everything, plus there is no hidden meaning. So I'm going to take a little bit of a detour into, so I'm often introduced as an activist poet because I did a lot of anti-war trips to Washington during the Iraq War. And so I'm going to read 2 poems that might be considered activist poems. I take my students out, and you can do this with poetry if you have environmental concerns or any kind of concerns about anything. Instead of just like checking your phone and worrying about everything, you can take poetry outdoors and just read it. Like you can even read it in front of your legislator's office, and they're freaked out if you do it. They won't arrest you, but they will be freaked out. If you take poetry anywhere, people are freaked out. So this is a poem about that. Right after the EPA, the recent administration was trying to get rid of the EPA, which is really important, Environmental Protection Agency. Anyway, we took poetry out to a shopping center, and this is what happened. Report on another encounter in nature. After the EPA began to unravel, some students and I went out to read what used to be called nature poetry at a shopping center wearing Russian gas masks we had purchased on the internet. The students were brave. We were surrounded by grassy hills with so-called invasive species. There was a little buzzing from the edge of the universe. We felt everything intensely. Phrases sliced through the minutes that moved away through space. At the Safeway, a man came up to us, an older white guy, and asked what we were doing there. I said we were reading nature poetry outdoors because of what was happening to the EPA. Squibble, 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 squibble. He said we would have to take our protest elsewhere. I said we were part of an ecology class. He said he owned the Safeway and we would have to leave. I looked at his Volvo, its gas tank full of screaming dead animals from the Cretaceous, a warm geologic period of shallow inland seas, a phrase I've always found comforting. We moved our reading a few yards away to some not dirty western dirt full of not yet extracted minerals and secret water I pray to. Poets can bring odd thoughts outdoors. We moved to another town and read there. The rubber tube of our gas masks looks like the snouts of ancient anteaters dangling over the pages or phones without being connected. At first, it was hard to read the poems through the scratched eye goggles. Then we got the hang of it. We wondered how the gas masks had been used before this, just practice for war or what, since they were sold on the web for $10 each. What happened to our interlocutor? How will he live out his days without poetry, with his features congested by fumes? If I knew his name, I would place it here in the poem instead of this text corrupter. Here is a little spell. We will not meet him again on this earth. We will not meet him on the stairs of hell. We will not meet him in a place unseen. We will not meet him in a wishing well. There are books and beauty where we dwell. We will love each other in a dream. Well, you can do poetry readings anywhere. So just remember that when you start writing your poems, or even if you don't write your poems, you can take anybody's poems out there. It shocks people, but especially if you wear Russian gas masks, I can guarantee you It's very freaky. So there's a picture of this in this book if you want to take a look at it. Okay, now I've sort of talked you into this sort of poetic behavior. So my family I grew up with families of hunters, and they were gun owners, a lot of them, especially the southern relatives. And when lots of school shootings started happening, my dad passed away, and he had always referred to a gun that he owned. And I was always nervous about the gun, but anyway, we decided we would try to look for it. And one of the things, I'm not going to try to talk you out of gun ownership or try to talk you out of hunting for sure, but we don't need so many guns in the country, so one of the things I sort of am on a campaign about is at least to get rid of one family gun. So, The Family Sells the Family Gun, a prose ballad. I only held it once, but thought about it often as you think about those times when your life had stood both loaded and unloaded. Oh, I forgot to say, Emily Dickinson has a great poem called My Life Had Stood a Loaded Gun, and this brings her lines in and out, so that's her line, your life had stood unloaded. I only held it once, but thought about it often as you think about those times when your life had stood both loaded and unloaded. One brother knew of its existence, having seen it where it languished in the famed green storage unit, from which it had been transferred to the bank box, but we never knew quite when. Information our father had, and something he was squeamish about, or proud of at the same time, the way Protestants are about genitals. We believed it was a Luger, maybe taken from a soldier in the war our father trained for, but didn't ever get to because he was wounded in the knee. Sustained is the word they use, sustained a wound in infantry maneuvers before his men were mostly killed after D-Day. When his ashes in the desert grave were lying, we took the weapon from the bank box. I put it quickly in my handbag to get it past the teller. The holster was the smoothest leather, brown and heavy, the yawning L shape of the Luger Google says Georg Luger designed in 1898. The holster smooth as the jackets of German soldiers in the movies. And what had they done to make the cowhide smooth like that? And what had they done with the cow? We thought of burying it in the desert, but if you Google burying a firearm, it changes to a search for buying a firearm. You can also look up how to load a semi-automatic weapon on YouTube, where a white man with thick hands and a wedding band shows you how to check for rounds in what order and tells you how to handle it with your dominant hand. We shouldn't take it to the cops. We couldn't take it to the cops, even in my handbag, though Arizona is open carry and you can take it anywhere in public, but cops can shoot you if you take your gun to their station. One young Tucson cop named Matt agreed to come to us and check the magazine and said it was unloaded, looked upon us with excruciating mild pity, said this relic might be worth some money, and stroked it the way some boys do. I couldn't tell what the brothers were thinking. It felt like tragedy, but reversible. Our father's ghost stood like a tall working summer, like Hamlet's father, a ghost appearing only in the day and good-naturedly telling people not to do the killing, but still trying to control the actions of the play. You can think about ghostly word weapons nonstop. Let's just take a shot at it. She was going great guns. He loved her but couldn't quite pull the trigger. Better just to bite the bullet, kill an hour or two. And for some reason, maybe sorrow for our father's power, lack of power, I felt a twinge when my brother whisked the tiny heavy out of there. My life had stood a secret little hiddenly shameful semi-automatic firearm, and when at night a good day done, I guard my master's head. My younger brother sold it for $600 at a Tucson gun shop, one of those outfits where the master paces behind the counter offering advice on collecting, and he is so proud of his stash. It was a Tuesday, I think, a Tuesday inside history where America is lost. And what should we do with the cash? So I have a daughter I love very much. We've all been stressed about our children. All parents have been stressed about our children during the pandemic, knowing how stressed everybody is. So this is a poem I wrote for some friends with daughters who were sort of in trouble. And my daughter was really stressed. And so I was thinking about beauty and how much beauty saves us anyway, even if life is really very full of struggles. Winter Daybreak Stanzas for our daughters. The gibbous moon sits swollen among the god amounts, passing and elsewhere of those who know our daughters. Experience and peril are both experimental, from the root pur to risk. I call on figures whose atoms might protect us, while deer feed on ferns with elderly brown spores. Our daughters were born when our lives were in chaos. After that, we were able to love. Now they live past our reach, but we're sleepless when they have trouble. They spend days sorting toxic minutes from calm layers, and their honesty is rare in the working world. One doe scratches an itch on her back, jaw moving counterclockwise, her smart nose reaching far into the dawn. Her fawn spots merged with sunlight so long ago and will circle the tree forever. The perceiving mind is restless, but can surround the infinite stress of human love. So I'm going to read 2 poems for writers, and then maybe 2 more poems after that. So this may not reach your heart if you're not writing poetry, but if you are writing poetry, or even whether you have whatever your endeavor is, maybe it'll strike you. I had a friend who had just published a book of poems, and when you've been looking, this is my 11th book, so I'm sort of on the other end of this experience. But this friend said, I expected something else to happen. She had worked really hard to get this book to come out, and I had expected something else to happen, and so she did a whole series on a blog asking more experienced writers to speak about the experience of sort of writerly disappointment. And so anyway, this is kind of addressed to her. But it's to everybody who's writing. It was on Twitter, and there were lots of retweets. I thought I'd read it today. Dear emerging, pre-emerging, and post-emerging poets, Lisa has asked me to write you a note in case you are feeling discouraged about some public aspects of your poetry. It's hard not to be discouraged when there is so much ignorance helplessly displayed toward our art. It is not surprising that you feel overly sensitive when poetry, or your poetry, is ignored. Books of poetry are left off best of lists. They are rarely reviewed in major venues, and when they are mentioned, it might be only for some perceived aspect of marketable content. Try to get past this. You are bringing your rare imagination and your love of language to the culture that needs these things. Poetry is not a specialized field. It has universal and eternal value. It is something most people start writing when they are children. It is what humans read to each other at weddings and funerals. It takes us into vast spiritual adventures. It enacts original dreams. You do not need to dumb down your art or ignore a century of modernist practice to please what is sometimes called a larger audience. It is not a poet's job to simplify the mystery of existence or its lexicon. Is the life of the soul ever easy? When you get downcast, keep in mind those who have encouraged you along the way and write for them. Imagine a stranger who may be reading one of your poems in secret someday. Try not to think about people who are writing facile things on the internet. Remember the radical ancestor poets who have gone before, especially those who have received less encouragement than they should have, those whose genius was insufficiently recognized. Their poetry provides excellent company, as does the work of great living poets who offer inspiration and consolation. Read across aesthetic lines and identity groups, assembling a varied canon. When you feel paralyzed by the pointlessness of temporary fashion, or when dull or predictable work is lauded, try new things that will surprise you as you work for the joy of the process, remembering that all a writer needs are 4 true readers, and one of them may be a tree. Never look at your phone when walking downstairs. Do not destroy your body by self-medicating under poetic stress. Just write new poems and read them to your community. Keep your ego in balance because ego projects are doomed to fail. If you don't receive the rewards you deserve from the outside world, and you very likely will not, try to celebrate the good work of others. Hold love in your heart. Work for justice and for humans and non-humans, and keep writing. Love, Brenda. So that applies to just about anything. If you're doing something like playing soccer or anything else, you can substitute soccer for poetry in that letter. Okay, I'm going to read one COVID poem and then maybe 2 love poems. Excuse me. Minnesota air is getting me. I like the rain, though. Thank you for the rain. That was really cool. Very hard. So I wrote a whole series of poems. Our local church was having a celebration of the Book of Revelation and the Apocalypse, right when the pandemic started. And since we've all lived through the pandemic, I wanted to read you a pandemic poem. In the split garden's irrational hope, I saw the clouds go by in used lab coats. I heard the neighbor looking for her cat. The hour is come, the prophet wrote. The squirrel has no apocalypse and shakes a gravid branch, consciousness in high places. Quietly, we walk quietly past the closed storefronts, buckets out front, roses outpace the thrips, no average realism. Oh, sleeper, stay with me, for I have buried my alphabet in a garden of zeros. They ask us to make videos to comfort people, hands on the dying, on the glass. So I prop my phone up on a basket and record a poem for elders and inmates. To what end, a voice asks. The system is sick, whatever the system is. Then the voice between mystery and meaning uncancels the journey. Inexhaustible light has entered us, sufferer, right out to the sea of gray stars. And I'll read 2 love poems. I have a whole series. I realized during the pandemic how much I love my husband. I mean, I've always realized that, but you tend to, I'm in a very long marriage, and you tend to sort of go by, oh, I love that person, and then you sort of get past it. But he had heart surgery in the pandemic, and I wrote him a series of poems while, so in my area, we have evacuation alerts when you're going to have to evacuate your house because of a wildfire. So I wrote a series of poems that had to do with packing my car, because my husband's a very good sleeper and I'm not a good sleeper, so I go to the car and start packing in a kind of panic when I get one of these evacuation alerts. So I wrote some poems about that, and it surprised me that it sort of turned into a series of love poems. So I'm going to read 2 of those, and that'll be the end of my reading. And thank you so much for your attention, and please do write your poems. Remember, you can just start with a line a day in your notebook, And the world needs your poems, and it needs your writing, and it needs your imagination. And you may think, oh, would take me forever, but you all overhear really beautiful language every day, and then you forget that you've heard it. And so just write it in your notebook, and I'm happy to talk to you about that. The themes, let's see, I think I'll read them in the opposite order that they were written, actually. This one was in the New York Times on Sunday, so it's now a little bit of a famous poem in that you know, your dentist reads it if it's in the New York Times. Otherwise, your dentist may not see your poems. During an enchantment in the life, do you love a living person? Absolutely, tell them now. In a half unwieldy life you made under the hyaline sky, while the dead drank from zigzag pools nearby, if they saved you in your wild incapacities, in timing of the world's harm, in the little pettiness in your own heart, while others took your madrigals in shreds to a tribunal, when others said you should feel grateful to be minimally adequate for the world's triple exposure or some tired committee. The ones who love us, how do they break through our defenses? We're tired today, come back later. Their baffled voices melting our wax walls with a candle. The ones who understand what being is, the glowing, the broken, the wheels, the brave ones, they have their courage, you have yours. When you meet the one you love, it is so rare. When you meet the one who loves you, it is extremely rare. And I'll close with a poem then about packing. The themes in American literature. It's kind of a nervy title, I know, but I thought I'd just go for it. The themes in American literature. The great theme of American literature is 1, the search for home. 2, the search for love. 3, the search. 4, great themes are not American. When the woman smells smoke, she packs her college notes in the trunk, packs the children's art, funny ceramics with superannuated glazes, packs the fossil collection from 60 million BCE, broken camera someone once threw at her, packs quilts made of overalls in 1923, centuries of women of all skin tones sewing and praying under their breath. The breath for women is low. And when you fold up the frayed thing made by women's hands, please don't ask, did your mother work? Some families don't save much. The woman packs her letters from the age of paper. Maybe she met her love in a book someone gave her. She met him between the lines of a letter. He lived nearby and came to drop a package for her then husband. Stood in the kitchen, handsome and kind. Stood in the kitchen, now filled with floating ash. Seemed to listen with his whole mind. Did she hold her baby then? A story began to form. There's always a crisis. Great love starts in a crisis. Density of ash settling in the air and the folds of things and wings outside. The wasp gall turns on its side in the night, abandons larva movement, replaced by escape through punctuation. Marks like the smell of the gall in the field at the end of time. She packs the letters they sent. He was in charge of summer. He was kind to her child. If there are specks in other people's houses, in your mouths, if you were the settler or the victim of profit, now ashes of houses where some were loved and lived their lives in the oxygen of many people now. Each time they pack, an epic is remade. No, 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 no. No more empires, please. No more stepping over prone bodies while wearing genteel yoga pants, please. No more fracking in the Pacific, please. No more climate idiocies. There will again be great cities where dirt sits down outside, 50 million years of it. There will again be syllables to mingle with the plants and float to their demise. To angels who won't return in the same way, but in the ashen voice of crystal time we say, before our kind shall disappear and your kind and their kind. Thus was the seventh seal broken, and someone was making a meatless dinner. And thus the lovers lived in ordinary glory, danger, air from the owl's wings falling over them. Those who had lived before them and would love again, and the glabrous leaves made traces by day, The orange glow from the ring of the fire blocked the sun. Let it be said their bodies kept the chaos out. The alto moon of the smoke alarm glowed above their bed, while Earth survived its humans through the tear tear at the back of each eye. Sensation rushed in all its needed color, and dawn pleaded for a boat not made from threatened trees, not wine dark, not tragic, and never distinct from literature. Thank you so much for listening. So we're going to do Q&A if people have questions.